Hello, everybody. I'm back. Excuse me. Thursday nights, Minutes of Milo, live edition. It's always live. See, hear that guy talking? It's always live if you're tuning in Thursday night at 9. Then after that, it's just an ever-present rerun of the live show, which is okay. Some people can't join me live. That's fine. Join me as a video. Either way, it's fine. If you don't, then you're probably not even watching this anyway. So why don't come watch it? Sign up, subscribe to the channel, listen to the dumb stuff I talk about. All right. So I don't think it's been a year. Maybe it's been a year. I didn't look back, but I used to do a Thursday night review of the Survivor Series on CBS, and I won't say it was well received. It was received by some, not by all, but that's okay. I thought I would try that. And I mean, I had fun. We went over who's voted off and why, what my opinions were on this, that, or another thing, the strategies, all that kind of stuff. You can go back and find it, look at it if you want to. But the new season of Survivor started not last night, a week ago from last night, whatever night that was. And of course, me and the little wifey poo were watching it. And I can't help myself. Thursday morning, Wednesday night, quarterback these things and think, well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? And why don't these people do this? And I've got to remind myself, they're on the show, you're not, so, shut up. Why? But I can't help it. Rolls around in my brain. And I say to myself, well, that's true. If I had the gumption and the wherewithal, that's the expression, to apply, to get on and all that stuff, would I even think of doing all the things that I talk about doing when I'm just sitting back in my easy chair, having a cold beverage and thinking, man, if I was there, this is what I would have done. But here's something that I can guarantee you that I would probably do if it ever came down to the fact that I was going to get on the show. Hey, Robert, what's up? So I'm doing a little, are you watching Survivor this season? I think you may catch some of it. I don't know if you watch every night of it, but it's on. In case you didn't know, and maybe that's why you haven't been watching it, because it's the only show worth watching on Wednesday night. It's on, and I was watching it last night and came up with a couple of things in my long list of to-dos if I were to ever get on the show. So it's probably going to be kind of a short show this evening because I don't want to ramble on and on, but I probably will ramble on and on about, okay, good. You watched it last night. So I'm not going to, I don't know if you remember, a few seasons ago, I did a full review every Thursday night on what happened on Wednesday night show. I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that I'm pretty sure I would do if I were really going to be a contestant. And I don't know how long. It's one of those, I won't say hidden things. You might be able to piece it together. I do know one guy last night the night before, the premiere night, talked about he was an alternate. And he knew he was an alternate for the show this season. And he got the call, and it was like 30 minutes before he went to bed. He had to catch a plane the next day. So he packed 3 shirts and some things and left. Okay? So he knew he was an alternate, which gives you a little bit of a glimpse into, okay, so they give you some lead time. They have to give you lead time. You have to get time off from work. You have to get babysitters. You have to, you know, go through all this stuff. So they do have lead time. What I'm talking about doing is if you were serious about it and you were going to try to get on Survivor, and you did, and I guess years ago they used to, maybe you still can, uh, get on and watch the audition tapes for some of the people that made it on the show. And I'm guessing, you know, there's probably an online application form and do all that, and potentially you might have to send in an audition video, and you know, there's processes and steps and all this stuff. So at some point, before you apply or after you apply, or you know, just in preparation of thinking I might make it onto the show, there's some things I think everybody should do. And I know some of these are not outdoorsy people. I'm not a super outdoorsy people. I mean, you know, I've done some outdoorsy things. I've camped some outdoorsy places. You know, I've done some things. I'm not much of a hunter, trapper, you know, beaver skinner or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, that aside, I would have a plan. And here's a couple of things. As the show has progressed, they've changed it a little about when people get to the island and they're new to the island. They used to not give them supplies. At first, man, they didn't even give them drinkable water. All right, so these people now, they at least get potable water and something to carry it in. In the first days, if they didn't have fire to boil the water, they just didn't drink. Or like, was it Rudy, the 70-year-old Navy SEAL or something like that? He said, "To heck with it, man. I'm dying of thirst. I'm either going to die from parasites or I'm going to die of thirst." Was that true? I doubt if they would let him die. Garthog, how's it going? But he drank some questionable water. Well, it didn't kill him. But like I said, you know, at first they didn't give him food. They didn't give him water. They didn't give him anything. And as seasons progressed, sometimes, you know, they gave him certain things just right up front, including some rice. And it's gone back and forth and back and forth. What did they get when they first got onto the island? Well, now they have a challenge at the very beginning, and whoever wins the challenge, there's 3 teams now. The 2 teams that win the challenge, they get a machete and a flint. Now, they didn't give them any rice this time. So, but at least they have, you know, a machete and some flint, so they can make fire and chop things up and all this other stuff. Okay, so let's just go on that premise. Now, if you're the loser, you don't get anything. They still get drinkable water. They give them water. But they don't get a machete or they don't get flint. So they can't, it's not easy to make fire. I want to say that because here's the crux of my talk for this evening. If you're going to be on Survivor, you got to make a list. All right. First thing is you've got to be physically conditioned to go. And that doesn't only just mean, you know, I have to be able to run 5 miles in the sand. No. I mean, you know, if you don't live in the sand or a sandy place or whatever, but, you know, you couldn't do that. But still, you've got to build up your lung capacity. And a lot of this is mostly endurance. It's a lot of endurance because it's hot. You know, we talked about last night's show, it was 100 degrees in Fiji. I don't know what the humidity was, but it's on the ocean, man, so it's got to be humid. So that saps strength, stamina a lot. Okay, so start building up your, you know, your heart rate, your lung capacity, your endurance. Start doing some aerobic activity, including some, you know, carrying things, because they carry everything. You know, they carry blocks, they carry wood, they carry puzzle pieces. They carry each other. It's just crazy. They carry things, they pull things, they tote things. So I would suggest some type of CrossFit and eat a lot of calories. Don't eat big meals, and here's why. If you eat a big meal, it stretches your stomach, okay? So then you become hungrier and hungrier and hungrier because your stomach gets big. If it were me, I would eat a lot of high fat calories in small meals throughout the day. Why? Because you want to build up a layer of body fat. If you go into Survivor and you don't get rice to begin with, even if you get rice to begin with, it's carbs. There's no protein in it. Your body is going to start just devouring itself for energy. So you got to go in with some reserves. And if you've ever watched these things, the heavier people, they make it through the first few days, the first week, week and a half, and you can really see the weight start to come off of them because they're working out every day. They're not eating a lot. They're drinking tons of water because they've got to stay hydrated. They're not sleeping well, so stress level's pretty high, and they start really to drop weight. Well, you don't want to go in skinny as a rail, fit, skinny fit. You want to go in with some reserves. I couldn't, I'm not a physician, I'm not a personal trainer, but I would think you would have to go in with some reserves. Not a bunch, because then you're going to have to carry around a lot of extra weight, and your performance dictates whether or not a lot of times you get kept on the tribe or not. So, back to my original thought. You've got to have some lead time. If you think you're going to apply, even though you think the chances are very, very slim you would get on, you got to get on that regimen quick. Because you can't just pack it on in 2 weeks and expect to be fit enough to go. All right, so people that are naturally athletic and do things all the time probably fare the best. So, you want to be able to have some reserves on body weight. You want to be able to be physically active without, dying after I'm going to say 30 seconds. Right now, I wouldn't last 30 seconds doing some of the things they do. No lie. It'd kill me. Okay? But if I were going to be on there, I would work up to it. You have to start working up to it. The other thing is do some research. Now, I'm going to mention it. I did some research on AI, on things that are available in Fiji, and what could you use, what's the island made up of. Even 2 or 3 years ago, before AI, you could Google this stuff. Even before that, you could read library books. And before that, guess what? The encyclopedia would help. All I'm saying is, do your research. Are there edible plants other than stupid coconuts or papayas? And if you find papayas or coconut, when are they fit to eat? Right? Not everything's ripe and edible when you want it to be. Okay? So last night I was watching, and they were eating earthworms. Not a bad choice if you don't have anything else. But the ocean people are full of fish. One tribe caught a huge, I won't call it a hermit crab, but it was a huge hermit crab in this shell, and it was, big. And they boiled it and ate it. Would that be safe? Do some research. Figure out, could you eat a water snake? Right? Could you trap something on land like a snake, chop its head off, and eat it? Now, I've never seen anybody do that. And I don't know. Maybe there's, Fiji regulations about doing something like that. I don't know, But worry about that when you get there. What could I kill and eat? What could I trap and eat? What fruits are available? Is there something that I could, chew on, leaves, bark, anything? Do some research. Find out what is your friend and what's not your friend. And, okay. I'm sorry, I was distracted here. I don't know why these things are popping up on my screen now. What was I saying? Do your research, find out what's good, what's edible, what's not. What could you use for sunburn? You know, do some research. Find out, you're going to be in Fiji. They don't do it anywhere else anymore. They haven't for years. They haven't gone to Australia. They haven't gone to Africa. They haven't gone to any of these other places. It's always in Fiji. Do some research. Figure out what you're up against. And do some basic survival training. Now, I have seen these past few seasons the super fans. A dude made his own ninja style course out of past immunity challenges. Excellent. They do puzzles, build their own puzzles and work them. Excellent. Prepare for those things. They almost always, you'll hear them say, well, I practiced building fire for a month before I came here, or for weeks, whatever it might be. Because they almost always have some type of fire building challenge, or if they have flints and steel, they need to make a campfire. But inevitably, there's always one tribe that loses first. They lose it again the second time. They lose again the third time. And they go days and weeks with no flint and no machete. Prepare for that. That is where you really get hit hard. And why do I say that? Because there's ways of making fire without flint and steel. And you need to know how that works. All right. So I have no way ever tried it. Okay. So just I'm putting that out there. I'm the biggest Monday morning quarterback right now that there ever was, because I haven't done it. But I know it can be done. Why? I've you know I've read up on it. I've researched it a little bit. I've seen it done on YouTube. It can be done. All right. So they have shoes on Survivor. The shoes have shoelaces. If I were going to do this, and I asked Gemini, of course, because I can't get this other one to work, about 3 different ways that you could make fire without steel, without flint, just by using friction. And they always have bamboo. Okay? I don't know if it grows there. I don't know if the crew from Survivor throws it on there for them, but they always have bamboo. Okay? So even without a machete, without that kind of cutting tool, there's probably bamboo somewhere on the ground that you can use for this. And dry wood. I know it rains. I know all that stuff. But they're using coconut husks and things. So I asked, could you use a broken seashell instead of a knife to scrape and form, if you do a bow, what is it called? A fire bow. There's the fire plow. A bow drill. There we go. Okay. So to make a bow drill, probably the most thing that you wouldn't have, that you might not have, would be the, the string part. You have to have a curved stick like a bow and arrow, and small like a violin bow. But you have to have that string, and it has to be, a string without knots in it, because what you're going to do is wrap it around this, stick, and you're going to saw it back and forth and hold the top, and you have a fireboard on the bottom. It's got to be shaped. It's got to be set up. I know that's all things that have to be done, but you could practice skill balancing, knot tying, yeah. Swimming, yeah, there's people there. It was like I got into a pool for the first time at 25, 2 days before Survivor. I've seen them do that, you know. So do a little research on different ways to make friction fire. Because if you do that and you can make friction fire, then you've got a heat source. The oceans are full of fish. You can make fish traps. And there's, you know, if you found a sharp seashell or, some type of slate rock, something that, is fairly sharp, not like flint, because then, maybe you could find some steel and you'd have flint and steel. But according to, the rock geology in Fiji, you know, there's rocks that are formed there that you could break up and get you a sharp edge. And once you have that, you can cut sticks, you could cut the palm fronds, you could do all that, and you could weave a fish basket, a trap. Or what my idea was is making a tidal pool fish trap. So when the high tide's in, the little fishies swimming around in your trap that's dug into the sand on the beach and reinforced with sticks. I didn't think about that part. But Jim and I told me you reinforce the walls with sticks so the sand doesn't all wash away. And then as the tide recedes, the fish traps are shaped such a way that the fish will swim in, but then they don't swim out. And they just kind of swim around in the pool, in the sand that you've dug. And so when the tide goes out, low tide, hopefully, there's little fish in the pool. And then you could just get in there and get them out. And if you had basic research and practice on doing some of these primitive survival skills, even though you lose the first challenge and you don't have a machete in your flint, hopefully you could build a fire and then build a trap and find you these primitive tools that you could use to say, hey Jeff, I don't need your flint and steel. I've got a fire. I've got my fish trap. They caught that giant hermit crab on the land. She just happened to find it or saw it or the survivor gods put it there. I don't know which it was, but there it was in a big shell. So, at low tide, even in some of the ones that I've seen in the past, there's always tidal pools and things like that. Modify a tidal pool with sticks in a way to make, so the fish don't swim out of it and catch fish. They would catch rock crabs running along the rock, but you should have a way to cook it. So I was just thinking about that last night. Why don't these people, and there's one guy that has camping skills, but his tribe already has a flint and a machete. So I'm not saying that it's easy to make fire that way, but it's sure easier to do it that way than with, a bow drill or a fire plow. One of the things that, I've seen done, and, I asked Jim and I to tell me 3 ways to make fire without flint and steel. And if you had bamboo and access to a sharp object like a shell or a sharpened rock, could you do these things? And that's basically all you need, especially, if you have bamboo, because it's curved like this. And you sit that down on the ground and you have a stick that's pointed on one end and you just start rubbing back and forth, up and down, up and down, up and down on the bamboo, and it cuts a groove. And the more you do it, the harder and faster you do it, the more friction builds up. Would it be easy? No. What else do you have to do? I know sleep and drink water and talk strategy. But other than that, what do you have to do? Hunt for food, try to get a fire going so you can cook said food, or catch a bunch of minnows and eat them raw, I guess, but don't depend on earthworms or, even if you found a giant hermit crab, I wouldn't touch the thing without cooking it. I've seen, people on Survivor catch mice okay. But you got to clean them and cook them. You can't eat island rats, mice, whatever, raw. So if you're going to be applying to Survivor, just help me out here. Help me out and do some research. Practice some of these things. You know, your endurance, but practice very primitive survival skills. Because if you get there and you lose your first challenge and you don't have a pot and you don't have, flint and you don't have a machete, you're still out there. You're still going to have to survive. You would do a lot better, I think, in the show and have a lot better time if you could say, I don't even know if I would tell the tribe, hey, I can do this. You need to help me. I would just, everybody get around, if you've ever watched it, apparently you know what the first few hours are like and all that. Then after that, things kind of settle down. I've often thought that, once everything kind of settled down, people wanted to try to get some kind of shelter together for the night or something like that, then there's plenty of time to say, hey, I think I'm going to go down and explore the beach. Or let's go down to the water hole or whatever and, get some water. And while you're doing that, it's just like, look for sharp rocks, look for broken shells, look for really old dried coconut husks. I've often wondered how many islands they use for Survivor, because they build elaborate sets and they build elaborate, challenges on these islands. And they have to clear the jungle, they have to clear the trees, they have to go all that. So do they go from one island to the next to the next? Do they rotate between 5 islands? Do they use the same island? I just don't know. I'd love to know some of the logistics behind that, because let's just say they used 2 or 3 islands. Well, after 6 or 7 seasons of, rotating in and out these people are doing Survivor, yeah, you got to hold back some of those things. But if you could build a fire or catch fish, even in secret, that would be a big help. Because, okay, let's say you're really strategic and you have pretty good survival skills with just basic tools. You go around and build your trap on the other side of the peninsula or whatever, because, I don't know if they limit them to the size of the beaches. Sometimes there's a section of beaches that, is outside of the purview of the shelter. Maybe you could dig your own fish trap. Maybe you could build you a small fire on the beach and, cook your own hermit crab and keep it a secret maybe. Probably not, because wind blows, fire smoke, it's out. You probably couldn't ever make a clean enough fire that would burn hot enough to cook something that doesn't generate a lot of smoke. So that skill might be hard to hide. But bring it out into the open if you had to. But you want to eat, you want to survive, you want to have energy to go to these next challenges and stuff. But practice those things. There's, back to the rotation. They have to have crew members come along and they have to clean that stuff up, but they can't get everything. Like, these people are eating coconut after coconut after coconut. And they're just, tossing the husks down, and they're tossing, the shells down after they've ate the meat. Some of that stuff still has to be lying around, and it's probably well seasoned. One of the things they use is they peel the hair off the coconut and you crunch it up and everything, and that's what they use to build the fires in. All right? The same thing with bamboo. It's a natural croft. So one of the other things that Jim and I talked about as far as making fire, was the fire saw. And you lay one piece down this way, you lay another piece on top of it, and where the edges come together, you just start pushing back and forth. And you've got 2 edges of this bamboo rubbing against each other, creating friction. Of course, the more you rub it, the more friction. Well, it says the dust, the hot dust, starts to collect in the bottom of that bamboo. And if you have enough friction, you get an ember going. It gets into that dust, and it can start, a little fire. And then, of course, you have to have your stuff together, sprinkle it in there, get your fire going. But I think by far the best method would be the bow drill. Make sure you wear shoes with shoelaces, tennis shoes with shoelaces, preferably really long shoelaces. Because the longer the bow, the longer the string, the more throw you have, the more revolutions you get on your stick when you're doing a bow drill. And the more friction you can get up, and it's easier. Like I said, never done it. Just doing the research. Just wondering why they don't ever do these things. And if they're all doing it at Fiji, you've got to have some stuff left over from the past tribe, from the past season. They just can't police those islands well enough to get rid of those. Those people are everywhere. They're searching for idols. They're throwing stuff down. They're carrying bamboo here and carrying bamboo there, breaking it off there. And stuff has to be laying around that you could use to build a fire. And they have to be resupplying some of these islands. Because let's just say you do. Very first day, you win a challenge, you get flint, you get a machete, you get a pot, and you're well enough and smart enough to win more challenges, and you get to keep it for a week or two or whatever. They give them fishing equipment. They give them all that stuff. They can't keep track of all that. They give them fishing lines and hooks and spears and masts and all that stuff. The big stuff, yeah, I can see them keeping track of that. But every little piece of fishing line, every hook, every sinker, whatever they give them, they can't. That stuff has to be laying around. And I don't think there's enough Fiji islands to go season after season after season after season and go to a virgin island every time. There just can't be that many. So I don't know if these people think of that. They never talk about it on the show. And they never act like, hey, when I was at home, I was practicing the bow drill all the time. Give me your shoelaces, or give me a shoelace. Go find me a springy rod, to make a bow, and a straight stick, and a sharpened seashell, or a piece of volcanic rock that's chipped off that's pretty sharp. Let's build a fish trap. Now, I have seen people do that. Weave a basket. That seems hard. There seems like there's some skill in that. How to get it weaved in and hold its, pressure against each other and keep it together and throw it out there and let fish swim into it. That seems hard. But digging holes in the sand and jamming sticks down in it to make a trough doesn't seem that hard. I mean, you just go along breaking off sticks until you got as many as you needed, and then, shoot, come on, buddy, what are you doing? What are you doing this to me? All right, hold on. I'm trying to get me shrunken down. Somehow I've really messed up my, here we go. Really messed up my shrinking ability here. All right, so let me show you what I asked Gemini to draw me. Because I was talking about digging a hole, a shallow hole in the beach, and making a tidal pool fish trap. And this is what it drew me. Now, this to me is on a very big scale. I think you would have to build something smaller than this. Okay? But the principle is still the same. And I would hope that there'd be enough, bait fish or whatever that swims in close to the shore when there's high tide to try to find things to eat, that they would get trapped in a pool like this. Right? I mean, look at that. That to me says I can catch fish and I can eat fish. Now, I know it's drew that and it's put fish in there for me. because that's what I asked for. But theoretically, you know, this would work. And like I said, what else do you have to do? Especially if you lost your challenge and you don't have anything but water to drink and coconuts to eat. Come on, people. Use a little brain power, do a little research, practice some skills. So if you get there, even if you do have flint and a machete, you don't start off with fishing equipment. If you could catch, you know, bluegill-sized fish, and you can catch them in a pool like this, 4 or 5 at a time, even at every high tide. I mean, you would be eating protein all the time, at least more than, you know, coconuts, right? So I don't understand why people don't come into this with at least book knowledge. Like if I applied this next time and never did anything, at least I have done some book research, and in theory, I know how it works in my mind. Have I ever done it? No. So, but I know how it should be done, and I have seen it done, even though it might be on YouTube. I've seen it done. And I think you could take that and translate it into some, you know, yeah, you'd need a backhoe. Yeah, you would. That's huge. And see what they're talking about doing the sticks. See the sticks around in here? So you dig the hole, you shove the sticks down in there, and then of course you build a berm. Now if you notice here, it shows it interlocking sticks in the back to help give it stability. Now, I don't know how big the waves are, you know. The waves at like South Carolina, North Carolina beaches, Myrtle Beach and all that stuff aren't huge. But I think they would be big enough to kind of play havoc on some of these sticks if they weren't driven down in there pretty deep. Right? So, yes. But what else do you have to do? If you build one and high tide comes in and you're waiting for it to go out and the tide starts to go out and all your sticks are gone, then guess what? You know, try again with bigger sticks or a bigger wall, or you know what I mean? What else do you have to do? And when you're hungry and you know you got nothing else to do, put your mind to something useful and try to, you know, try to do this. I just don't understand why. How do I close that? Close it. Close it. Hello. There you go. I don't understand uh, why people don't put a little more effort into this. They watch all the seasons, they watch all the strategies, they watch all the players, they watch all the puzzles, they watch all the, you know, all these things. And like I said, you know, you've seen it done, which is you know, a big help. But let's say you practice, you know, those puzzles where you have to move stuff around. There's a piece missing here. You move that around. You move that around. You know, let's say, oh well, I like those. I'm pretty good at those. I'm gonna practice those. And then the season you're on, they don't do one. They do all 3D puzzles. Uh, I've seen them where they had to build an arch like this out of freestanding puzzle pieces. Right? They had to get the arch together so it would hold itself, and then they started building the other pieces. You know, they mess it up, they change it up, they screw with you to make every season a little bit different. You know they're going to do that. But what they can't change is the fact we're on Fiji, there's fish in the ocean, there's bamboo to be had, and there's got to be some kind of scraping or cutting seashell or rock or maybe even a piece of glass. You know, I've read these things that talks about there's probably very few places, except for the deep woods and things like that, where that you would go that nobody has been there before. So people are garbage, junkies. They throw stuff down, they throw cans down, they throw glass bottles down. Maybe before Survivor came, this was a party island for the Fiji locals. I don't know. Look around, dig around, find something, you know. And yeah, you go on there and you start digging and snooping around in the jungle, you're going to get an immediate label on your back. Well, he's trying to find an idol. We don't like him. He's trying to find an idol. You might be out there trying to find a Pepsi bottle, or what it very first said was the magnifying. Well, I don't understand. I've seen a couple of episodes where guys that wear glasses take their glasses off and they try, why not? What else do you have to do? Take your glasses off, spend an hour every day, spend 2 hours every day trying to focus, trying to get the light on there, trying to get the right stuff to make a fire. And of course, I'm talking a lot about the fact you need fire, you need food, and all that. They don't give you a flint. You don't get your flint and your machete and stuff. Basic skills. But the thing I like about the tidal pool for fish, yeah, the initial setup, the initial 2 or 3 or however it might take to get it right. If you get it right, then you're going to catch fish all the time. So there you have it. That was my rant about, Survivor. See, this guy's done a hand drill fire. He's burning his hands right there. Oh, he did a hand drill. This is was another way. You take a long stick, you get it all set up, and if you don't have the string to make the bow, you just rub your hands down the stick. And I've seen some of these people on Survivor in the past try to do some of that. In fact, last night, the big muscular guy, I think, was trying to do the plow method, where he had 2 pieces of bamboo, and he was, hello, Milo, get your act together, son. It ain't working over there. It works over here. So he was doing probably the plow technique, and he was in the hot sun on the beach, like laying on his side trying to get this done. It was like, no wonder you're tired. You're a big dude, big muscles. You're in the heat of the day on the beach trying to rub this thing. And I have seen in the past, I give them credit. There's been tribes before that guys would take turns. They'd be rubbing. When they got so tired, they just pass it off and try again, pass it off and try again. What else do you have to do? Oh, you're wasting energy on that. Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that. But, the benefit is blisters, yeah, from rubbing that stick. But you got to have a pretty straight stick. Really, you'd have to have a pretty straight stick because you couldn't, try to get it to start a fire that way. You have to have a pretty straight stick with all the little, notches cut off, the little twigs cut off, because you'd really mess up your hands. Yep, some of it, that's kind of why I like the bow idea. Maybe the stick, that you wouldn't have to be perfectly straight, wouldn't have to be perfectly smooth, straight enough. Find you a stick that's straight enough. So, I don't know. Maybe, see around here, I thought about doing a video. I thought, well, don't get off your butt, and you do try it and videotape it and see what happens. Around here in East Tennessee, I bet you I could go out in the woods now and not find one piece of dry wood. It would be, maybe it's the same way at Fiji, but I would think, with all the bamboo lying around and things like that, and I don't, sometimes they show torrential downpours for rains on some of these. I'm sure Fiji has a rainy season and a non-rainy season, but I don't know. And I've seen people try to start fires with the flint and machete and not get it right. Maybe it's too damp. Maybe it's too humid. I don't know. But listen, that was my rant about Survivor this time. If you're going to do it, don't just watch the videos and, figure out the strategy and what kind of puzzles they used and what the challenges were and those kind of things. You know you're going to have to swim, right? Always. You know you're going to have to run and drag things. You know you're going to have to dig in the sand. You're going to have to climb and work puzzles. And you're going to have fire and something to eat. So anyway, there we go. I've said my way too long. I said this might be a short show. Got up on my soapbox. But I'll still think about the idea of trying to go out and filming me hunting sticks, getting everything together for a bow drill. Because I think that's probably, if you have shoelaces, I think that's probably going to be the best way to try to make a fire without using all your energy on, the physical activity. And it's funny. I never realized how much energy that it took to do small movements like that until you start getting older and your muscles don't recover as quickly and you're turning a screwdriver 30, 40, 50 times to try to get a screw in or out or back it in, back it out, and it's like, man. Or you're swinging a hammer, you're nailing this, you're nailing that, you're trying to break that, you're hitting this, and the next thing you know, you're breaking out into a sweat. It's like, dude, I'm swinging like a pound and a half hammer, But it's all about those little muscles that take, all the shock. It takes all the, bring it back, stop it, hit it. Bring it back, stop it, hit it. It takes all those muscles to do that. And you're old. I'm old. So, it takes more energy, seems like. Muscles don't recover as quick. They don't work as well. So, that's probably why I would never apply to Survivor, because it's so much easier playing the game from this side than it would be, to play it from the TV side. That, I'd get on the beach. It was like, man, where can I sit down and you people go ahead and have fun? I just want to, chill out here with Jeff for a little while. Maybe what would be really cool if you could make it to the jury. If you could last that long, fly under the radar, maybe make it to the jury, and then just chill out in in the Ponderosa. It's like, oh, cool, man. I get to hang out at Fiji and eat whatever the crew eats and drink whatever the crew drinks and play in the beach and all that stuff. So, no, I will if you will. No, getting too old for that. I know there's been older ones, but ooh, no. And anyway, I could go on and on about some of those things. But anyway, if you made it this far, like, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. Tell me what a doofus I am. Tell me how hard it is. Did you miss the first part where, Fluffy could be good? Because like I said, if you lose the first challenge, you don't get flint, you don't get your machete, you don't have a lot to eat, you got water to drink. If you survive days and in a week, you got reserves. You've got, food built in. And unlike the lady they voted off last night who just came in with, 6-7% body fat, it looked like. I mean, I told my wife, I said, man, if they don't get her something to eat, she will die because she has no body fat. And, no reserves for her body to draw on. The first thing it's going to do is start gobbling up some muscle, to feed itself for energy. But anyway, like, subscribe, drop me a line. I'll think about the idea of maybe doing a video on how bow drill. I might try it. Collect some sticks, try to find some dry wood, some leaves, something. I mean, I know if you're in tune with the forest, you can find the right tree bark, tear it up, do this, rub it under your armpit, lay it out, and have a fire. But I'm not. So, all right. Appreciate you guys coming, listening to me rant and rave about the Survivor experience, sitting on the nice couch. But all right, look for more videos. I'm lazy, so don't look too hard because there probably won't be any. But I've got some stuff that I've been, working on my cars, engine stuff. The only thing I really need to do is put it together, edit it, and upload a few things. So I might do some of that, and just putting some video content instead of these live things. Those seem to be watched more than the live. Even after it's not live, it's a video. I don't know. Anyway, all right. Appreciate it. Where's my stop button at? There it is. Thanks again. Everybody have a good week.